This is The Unhappy Millionaire, where entrepreneurs and other top performers discover how to go beyond the bank balance to create thriving, joyful lives. For more, visit theunhappymillionaire.com. And now, on to the show. So Tal, have you seen the video of Jerry Seinfeld's recent commencement speech?
Yeah, I saw it.
I loved it for many reasons. It's not perfect, but for what you'd expect from a comedian, I thought it was great. But there was particularly one line that I really loved where he said, there's the only two things you ever need to pay attention to in life are work and love. I agree with that 100%, particularly if you take love in the broadest sense. Now, we've talked a lot about work, and I hope that we get to continue talking about work, but I do want to talk about love and about relationships more broadly, because I think that's central to happiness. And it's one of the rewards for having a really productive life is that you have something to bring to the table. And I don't just mean materially, but more importantly, spiritually in your relationships. So maybe start off with how you think about relationships broadly, or what's striking you about this topic.
Well, first, I think I loved it too. And I love that he pushed back on some common conceptions about other things that I love that he pushes back on. He's honest and truthful. I think he's right. I think that you do two things. You love things and you love people, and then you do the work. It's a cycle. It's a virtuous cycle of finding meaning and finding things that attract you, all the way from activities and environments and places, and especially people. I think when he said love, he meant mostly relationship with people. But it's the passion that drives you. It's the fuel. And then what you do with the fuel is you go and you work and you build self-esteem and self-worth, which is the spiritual currency, and that I'm taking from Ayn Rand, right? The spiritual currency you bring to another type of exchange, which is relationships. So there are different types of relationships. Of course, the big one is the romantic relationship, where you express yourself in many different ways and you exchange in a deep way. And there are family relationships. You have your kids and you have your parents, you have your siblings, you have your extended family. And then there is the friendships, people you choose to have in your life according to what they give you. And then there's professional relationships, the people you can learn from, the people who help you grow, the people you mentor or mentor you. For me, it's a big domain of values, which is called relationships. So he touched on the key thing. I think other domains of value that you need to do, you need to know how to relax. You need to know how to do other things. You need to make money. But I think he's right that this is all a derivative of those two big things.
One reason for us, I think, to focus on relationships is because we've made such a big deal of the fact that we think that the core to happiness is pursuing your self-interest, and that morality is a guide to self-interest. And so the conventional way of thinking about, well, if you're pursuing your self-interest, it's at odds with deep, meaningful relationships. And so at the outset, I want to give my framework for thinking about relationships, like what is the basic way in which we should relate to other people. And in the end, I think there's three basic options. One is that they lose. And that's the conventional view of self-interest, is when I deal with you, I'm trying to manipulate you. I'm trying to get something for myself, either at your expense or without any consideration of what you stand to gain. The other is that I lose. And this is the altruist conception of I'm there to serve you, to sacrifice for you, to be exploited by you, and to give back.
Yeah.
That's a mixed model, right? It says, look, it's not sustainable that you lose all the time or I lose all the time. So sometimes you'll lose, sometimes I'll lose. And we reject both of those. And the term Ayn Rand gave to it is the trader principle. And it's the image that it brings to mind is a kind of business transaction, right? I go into the grocer and I give them money. They give me the groceries, and we both win because I valued the groceries more than the money. They valued the money more than the groceries. But the trader principle is a much deeper, much richer kind of perspective on human relationships, where what it really just means is win-win. And the win can be transactional. So if I go to the airport and buy something, I never expect to see that airport person again. It can be long-term enduring. You and I work together. We've worked together for years. I hope we work together for many more years. And so it's a business relationship, but it's not transactional in that delimited way. It's something that we want to nurture in an ongoing way. But there's also spiritual trades. And let me just read a quote from Ayn Rand, because I think this really captures something unique and profound about the way that we're thinking about relationships. She says, love, friendship, respect, admiration are the emotional responses of one man to the virtues of another. The spiritual payment given exchange for the personal, selfish pleasure which one man derives from the virtues of another man's character. So she's talking about the exchanges. I get to spend time with and get to know people who are virtuous, and it's that spiritual refueling, that inspiration that I get from them, the learning that I get from them, the joy of having my achievements recognized by people I respect. It's not, well, I'm friends with Tal because he lets me borrow his lawnmower and I cook him dinner. No, it's much deeper than that. And that's the kind of mutually fulfilling win-win relationships that are what you're talking about once you get into something like friendship and certainly romantic love.
Yeah, and it goes very deep. I think what Ayn Rand, the door she opened for me in this area was very, very deep. It allowed me to re-examine my relationships in my life all the way from my family, my extended family, my parenting, who do I want to be who do I want to offer to my kids, all the way to my romantic relationship. I think this dichotomy, if you think about when you don't have this perspective of the spiritual fuel or the spiritual exchange that you a win-win with other people, the other alternative is materialistic. That expresses itself with a lose-lose, I think, relationship. Also, you can see how in a romantic relationship, it sabotages the whole idea of a romantic relationship. I think for young people, they think about sex as materialistic, animalistic. If you take out the understanding of the spiritual currency, again, the exchange of virtue that is happening, which again is a win-win, you lose so much. You lose the whole humanity of relationships. You degrade it to, I think, what you see on the left politically, which is like, no, it's about the material. It's about the money. It's about the muscle. And so if you don't understand that, you can, honestly, I don't envy any Marxist in the way they think about relationships. If they take it really seriously, it's all materialistic. There's no spiritual aspect. It's all about exploiting. There's one cake that we all somehow split. So if I'm giving you, my lover, some more attention, I'm taking it from someone else. And you see that in business, the whole idea of I'm completely torn all the time. And what Ayn Rand did to me, she said, no, let me redefine this whole thing that you're doing. She opened a world of opportunities, but on the other hand, she raised the bar so much. I can't start to explain what she did on that. I had to completely re-examine my relationships, my friendships, even my work. What am I getting from the people around me? Am I learning from other people? Am I doing this for money or I'm doing this for... She really opened my eyes. Or I'm going to do a lecture soon about how she changed the eye of my mind, of how to think about it. I have to say it was so profound. It goes to the point where in your romantic relationship, you rethink sex. You rethink what you bring to a relationship and what you try to get out of a relationship and how to enjoy it. And for me, in my case, it was a complete overhaul of how I thought about relationships. And specifically at work, it immediately had me realize that my work environment is not where I want to be. It's not the place where I'm getting what I wanted to get. It's, for me, it's spiritual. Yes, there's a materialistic aspect of it, or I wouldn't call it materialistic, but a concrete aspect of I'm making money in order to pursue other values. For what? For other spiritual values, right? Again, going back to Seinfeld, the work and the love of people and the love of what you do and the love of things as well is what one needs to be focused on.
I want to really underscore something based on what you said. So I was at dinner with a couple really successful businessmen a couple weeks ago, and they were both fans of Atlas Shrugged. And we were talking about work and relationships as core to human flourishing. And one of them said to me, well, look, don't most people agree to that? Not David Brooks. There's Arthur Brooks had spoken at the same place I had spoken a few weeks before. And he said, yeah, work and relationships are key to flourishing. He said, so don't you basically agree? But I think what we've been talking about illustrates at a superficial level of abstraction, we agree these are components of flourishing. But once you start looking at what kind of relationships, on what terms, the idea that there should be no sacrifice, that both people should be in there for their selfish enjoyment, the idea that maybe you shouldn't be married if you're not happy versus no, you should tough it out for the kids. What is your happiness important? Or that you should value extended family regardless of their personal virtues or values, just because they share your genetics. If you're thinking about this from a pro-self orientation, it radically reconceives how you think about what a healthy relationship is and how you pursue it.
First, I want to say, don't listen to Arthur Brooks. I think his whole conception of happiness is ridden with errors and misconceptions and altruist morality that is conflicting. He will rip you apart. He will rip you apart, and I don't believe that he's a happy person. He made movies on happiness. He claims to be Dr. Happiness, and he always brings his credentials with him to he's not. And for me, Arthur Brooks, and I follow him because I'm trying to understand for me, I wouldn't call him an enemy, well, intellectual enemy, okay? He's an intellectual enemy as far as happiness for me. And what I'm trying to do and teach people is that be a good person, love everyone. He's religious, of course, so he brings the whole Christian morality with him. No, he's wrong. He's completely wrong. And I think this whole perspective that we're talking about has to come from a foundation that is completely different. It has to come from a different morality. And I think what we're trying to explain to people who struggle with this, and relationship can be very painful. I'm working with people who are stuck in marriages they're not enjoying, but with kids and in the middle of their lives, in the middle of the mortgage, and so much to lose. Even thinking about leaving my wife, isn't that horrible? Am I a horrible person? What about the boys, the girls? What do I do? And they're dependent on me, and am I going to rip there's so many dilemmas, and the problem that they cannot see the real thread or the principle that cuts through all of this. Like, why are you married? Why did you marry in the first place? What did you try to get? Are you getting it? No. Why not? Okay, so what are we optimizing for? We're optimizing for money in the bank. We're optimizing for my wife being satisfied. You having an affair outside the marriage. When you're not telling your wife, what are you doing? What is this game about? What are you trying to achieve here? Once you go from that and you put a pause and it's like, what am I trying to achieve? If they actually activate their mind for a minute about this, what I'm trying to achieve is my self-esteem, is my self-worth, is my happiness, then, okay, it's obvious for a minute saying it's an easy process. But once you clear your mind, you're standing firmly on a moral foundation where your happiness, your life, your experience in this world is what matters, then relationships take completely different perspective. I have to say, one of my most violent memories from the change that I've made is me driving, and I had a phone call with my grandmother. And it was the same exact phone call I had every week for my entire life. And before that, I spent way more time with her, but it was visiting with her every Friday at noon. By the way, you had to be there with the entire family to eat her food. And I won't go into the details, but she was not a good person. She destroyed my mother's life, and I decided that I'm going to fire my grandma. And immediately, I started sobbing like somebody died because I knew what that meant, and that I'm going to lose relationships with my aunts and uncles and their kids. And yeah, because she's a dictator of half of the family, and everybody bows to her. And I didn't want to do that anymore. So it was a violent decision, destroyed a lot of relationships. I paid prices for it, but it was one of my best decisions because it showed me that I get to choose. I get to choose who I love. I get to choose who I spend time with. And if they're trying to make me guilty about something, the relationship is based on coercion almost, right? I don't owe them anything. Other to my kids up to the age of 18, I don't owe anyone anything. And it took me a long time to understand that, but it was the most freeing idea that anyone could have given me. And I feel free now because I get to choose my relationships. I get to choose the people I work with. My tolerance for bad relationships has gone down to almost zero. I will give people the benefit of the doubt. And we can talk about how to even manage people, how I complete the way I think about even how to give people something that they don't even know is possible to them. Sometimes you see things that they don't see. But I think standing on a basis of a clear morality, a rational self-interest is freeing.
Well, let's turn to relationships at work, because I think it's a really interesting topic. And it's something I think a lot about. And the first thing I'll note is just, it's such an enormous source of joy, and it can be. I know that I met somebody at work back when I started the Einstein Institute in my early 20s, and he's another writer there, Alex Epstein. I know some people know him. We ended up living together, but I was getting a lot of mentorship. I even let him do jujitsu on me. I say do jujitsu on me rather than with me because it was mostly me just getting choked. But just so I had more opportunities for mentorship. And it was somebody who went on then to be a part of my life in a really deep way. That's the extreme best case scenario where you get a lifelong friend and mentor out of work. But just more broadly, it's such an opportunity to collaborate with people where you have a shared mission, you have certain shared values, particularly if you're at an organization that is that deeply mission driven. But nevertheless, I think there's so much upside potential, but they can also be really hard to navigate because here's a situation where you're bringing people together who might not be a good fit for friendships, and they do have to collaborate. You do have to deal with personality clashes. You sometimes have to deal with a conflict between this person's a really good performer, but they have certain, let's not say it rises to the level of criminal, you have to fire them, but they have certain things that are frustrating or that worry you that you have to navigate. But I think the same basic principle applies, that what you're trying to create at work are win-win relationships. If you have an entitled employee who's there and thinks, hey, the business is here for my happiness and I have to contribute anything, that's a real problem. If you have a bunch of martyrs running around, and I actually think this is one of the hard things, I want to hear what you have to say about management, Tal, but I find this one of the hard things, which is even that you'll have employees who are ambitious, they want to do a good job, but you have to monitor them to make sure they're not burn themselves out being a martyr for the company, doing things they don't like doing for hours, way beyond what they should be contributing, not taking care of themselves, not taking care of their other relationships. That what you really want are people who are pursuing their happiness around a shared mission. So whatever aspect you want to take, I'm really curious to hear about. And this is probably something we should explore in future episodes because it's such a rich topic.
First, let me just start by saying people are the most complex, wonderful organism that I know. And this is why the relationship with them is so complicated. And one has to think about relationship with other people as the most demanding, challenging, fascinating aspects of living a life. The way I think about managing is the way I think about any other type of relationship. You need to understand, well, first, who are they? I pay a lot of attention to who are the people around me. What motivates them? What animates them? What are they good at? What do they think they're good at and what they're really good at? And if there's a gap there, because a lot of people do not do enough work and are not centered enough to know what it is that they're enjoying and what it is that they're good at. And what I try to do with managing is to try to get to know the person. And honestly, with a 20, 30-minute call that I do one-on-one with most employees every year, even if I don't work with them, it's just, I ask the tough questions, like, tell me about your life. Tell me about what drives you. If you wanted to have any kind of job, what would it be? What do you do for hobbies? What interests you? What other things in the organization that other people are working on interests you? And so I'm trying to build their value galaxy, right, in the productive domain. And sometimes you see big gaps. And it's my responsibility as a manager, almost like someone who's responsible for their happiness and productivity, is to move them to a place where they can shine, where they can do more things that feel effortless. And it's amazing to see how you move a person from one environment to another, either working with other people, because they're more inspired to work with other types of people. And we can talk about personalities. Also working and focusing on other things. And you cannot just move them from one department to another, just a different project, a different focus, a different type of timelines, level of creativity and organization. There's all kinds of dimensions where you say, no, that person, it just suffers when we talk about creativity and everything unstructured. Move them to something more predictable, or the other way around. I mean, this person is suffering, put that in that Excel every day, so it kills them. For me, that's the essence of relationship, understanding who they are. Again, even if they don't understand who they are. And I do that again with, for instance, my kids. I'm really trying to understand who they are and what they want to express, even though they don't have the experience yet to know what's possible to them. So that's the, let's say, the positive part.
Well, let me just quickly highlight something there. It's easy to miss what you just said. So we've been talking about relationships to be win-win. Mm-hmm. One way of thinking about that is, hey, we're going to interact when I win and you interact with me when you win. But what you're highlighting is that the trader principle, and this is a point our friend John Allison, who used to run BB&T Banks, taught me. No, the trader principle also means that I'm thinking about how you can win. That's part of being in the trade. And you should be thinking about how I can. And I think that it so enriches your understanding of relationships. And as a manager,
Yeah, and this is what people don't get about rational self-interest. Even if I don't get immediate rewards, I do this for long-term rewards. So let's say that I'm sitting as a CEO thinking about someone junior, and I do that a lot. I can think about 3 different examples right now. And I'm spending time writing and thinking after the meeting with them, what will be their path in the organization for the next couple of years. And so why are you doing this? Because I want to live in a culture or work in a culture where people are thriving, where people are showing their best, right? And I'm going to spend days and nights to try and to make everybody around me as successful as possible. And just open your mind and see it's not just immediate and direct relationships, right? And that's what I think what trips people. It's long-term. They do understand long-term investments in money, but they don't understand long-term investments in virtue and in spiritual gains. Now, let's move to the negative side, and that's the lack of tolerance where you see lack of virtue, right? And it's amazing how one person can corrupt a whole organization. I was just meeting with someone who sold a company for billions, and he literally gave up a company because there was some bad apples, and they corrupted the whole organization to the point where I don't want to do this anymore. I give up on the whole thing that he built. So I don't tolerate people who have poisonous mentality about work. You call it the martyr, or someone who has a completely misunderstanding or relationship with work, is irrational with their relationship with other people, their expectation. And you're right. There are examples that are not trivial. The person who expects everyone to work on weekends. I'm going to work weekends and you're going to work weekends. I'm going to schedule meetings on Saturdays and Sundays, and you have to show up, and they're whipping their employees to shape or their colleagues to shape, and it makes it not fun. Not just it's not fun, it's not productive. It's, again, you can work out of duty or you can work out of passion. I am completely, as we talked about, I am for passion, rational passion. It's not a dichotomy. And whenever I see a poisonous person, and I had an example recently where someone was super productive, they were doing their job amazingly well in other aspects, but there was this one aspect where politically that person corrupted a whole, and after having a meeting with that person, let's say there were 5 people, the other 4 felt bad, and they didn't know why. It was not fun to have that meeting. And for me, it's not about fun or not. I go very deep into what did that employee do that made that meeting not fun. It's okay to have not fun, hard discussions, but why was that not fun? So I pay attention to that. And if it's a bad relation, no tolerance. You fire them or you remove yourself from it, and you pay the short-term prices, but you gain the long-term ones, which are much bigger.
one thing that I really want to bring out, because it's easy to miss, is that for win-win to be a reality, not every 2 people and not every person in every organization is there a possibility of a win-win. Sometimes there is an issue of fit. I think it's totally legitimate to have a company culture that says, we work 80 hours, we work weekends, we expect you to answer. Fine. But then if somebody doesn't want to work under those conditions, then you go your separate ways and you attract the person who's like, oh man, that's all I want is I just want to devote everything. It's totally legitimate to have a culture that says we kill ourselves for that Monday to Friday period, but then we want you to go out there and live your life. Cool. But the importance is we're going to have a win-win if we're a good fit for each other. And if not, we go our separate ways. And that's what makes it possible to have non-sacrificial relationships, is that idea of, I'm not forcing you to be here. I don't want you here if you're not getting what you want out of it. And so it's not a sacrifice. You're not demanding an employee sacrifice if you say, this is the way we do things, take it or leave it. It's only a sacrifice if you say, this is the way we do things, take it, don't leave. But thankfully, people can't today enforce that at a point of a gun.
Yeah, maybe just one thing. Let me take you to the most uncomfortable situation where you have to fire someone, okay? All I do, and I don't dread those discussions, because all I do, my attitude is I'm going to be very value-oriented. Look, you're not having fun here, and people around you are not having fun. And here's why. Here's what I would look for if I were you, because this is what I know about you. And they're like, wow, he took the time to think about who I am, what I want. This is what drives you, right? And they say, yes, that's what drives me. That's the environment I want. You want, right? Yes. It's not here. So go find this and that and this and this and that. By the way, I know this and that person Go work for them. They're like you, and that they have the environment you want. And as long as you bring this value-oriented to any kind of tough discussion, you'll be fine. Even if you want to get divorced, let's say, and you have this mentality, you're not having fun. I'm not having fun. We want something better. I know you. I'm not the right person for you. Somebody else can make you much happier. I want different things. Our values, we're not sharing. If you have those discussions, people will nod and say, yeah, they're thinking of me. Even in the toughest times of we're ripping a relationship apart, it works.
That's really profound. And bringing a value orientation even to things that are on the surface negative, I think that's transformative. Maybe maintaining and adopting a value orientation is a good topic to explore more in the future. To me, the biggest takeaways that I want people to walk away with are that relationships are a crucial part of life, but only when they're mutually fulfilling. And that comes from both people or all parties pursuing their self-interest. And that if you can't have both parties achieving their selfish interests, the solution is to go your own way and find a place and find people where there is a good fit. Mm-hmm. What do you think, Tal?
Completely. It's a relationship between two entities. It's not about one. It's about multiple. And that's what makes relationships so tough, because the entities of the relationship, especially if a complicated relationship like a company or a family, extended family, there are a lot of moving parts. And they're all different. I love the individuality of each one of those components. And it's a world in that one of those entities, those people in that relationship is an entity of itself with their own wants and their own personalities and their feelings. And it's, by the way, they're all moving targets. If you think that managing an organization is like, I'm going to set something up, we have a very clear mission. It's always, you bring one new person and the whole game changes. And ripple effects across the organization, one person. And so it's a chess game on the, I don't know what level of dimension, but that's the beauty of relationship. That's the hard thing about relationship. And it's exciting. I love getting to know people and what they want. Once you crack that code, you know what that person is. You can predict their behavior. You can predict their success or failure. And some people tell me, oh, I don't know how you knew that about that person. It's just try to understand who they are, and they will reveal their future to you. I mean, we both know someone very, very young working in the organization, or several people that are very, very young, right? They're just starting their career. But you can almost, if you think about them and who they are and what moves them, you can project how their life is going to be, how they're going to succeed if they stay true and genuine to who they are.
Future happy millionaires.
Exactly.
I'm Don Watkins, he's Tal Safani, and this has been The Unhappy Millionaire. Ready to take the next step in your journey? Visit theunhappymillionaire.com, where you can find powerful resources for building a life that you love and details on how you can work with Tal and me.